Okay, well, let's see how far we can get today. I wanted to, Lord willing, finish up just our review of the diagramming, the structural diagramming, um, and then hopefully we can get to the textual observations and see how that would apply to the poetic genre. And with our focus the last couple of sessions has been just reviewing the structural diagram. And one thing that one reason I wanted to do this, a couple reasons. One was just to again review the diagram, and because it's important in general when we're doing Bible study, but also too to point out some of the unique features when we're doing diagramming of poetry. There are a few things to keep in mind when we do poetry, and a lot of it has to do with remember the three elements of Hebrew poetry were terseness, imagery, and structure. Okay, and structure had to do with the parallelism, the acrostics, if you remember that, and then the imagery had to deal with the pictures, identifying the pictures in the poem, and then also the poetic devices that are used to develop those images. Now we looked at figurative language, and then also just other poetic devices. And then the terseness, and we'll find that in most Hebrew poetry, that has to do with the short statements, the what would I use, the term, the aesthetic quality, sort of the artistic nature of poetry. And part of that in Hebrew poetry is the brevity, the shortness of the statements. Well, in doing that, there's a couple of features that take place in Hebrew poetry, and they're important when we're looking at diagram. One of those is ellipsis, which again is, if you remember, the omission of a word or phrase, but it is assumed to be there in the meaning. All right, so we've seen that when we talked about parallelism. But the thing is that also too, when we're doing the diagram, there will be words or phrases that may not be written explicitly, but they're supposed to be there. So that will affect how you diagram the poem. And then the other thing is that ellipsis can often affect, especially the conjunctions. Conjunctions are often, I'll just say, missing. That is, the author intends a connection. Like normally you may have the conjunction, for, therefore, because, so that, and, but, right? These many conjunctions, and many times the author won't put them in, but they are assumed to be there, that there is a connection. And you just have to know that by when, as you study the poem, and you'll notice that. So I'll show you when we get to this poem, our example, Psalm 128, and you'll see that. So for diagramming, you have to really pay careful attention when we're doing diagramming poetry, because of this ellipsis that takes place in Hebrew poetry. And again, the goal of that is to make the lines shorter. It gives more emotional impact. It's more artistic. So we're going to go back to our exercise where we were doing Psalm 128 together. And we've already done part of this. So we'll just review quickly what we did last time, and then keep going. And Lord willing, you'll finish this diagram to this morning. So first, I'm going to ask Kazot if you could read Psalm 128, just to kind of get our minds thinking about this particular psalm again.
Psalm 128, a song of ascent. How blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. When you shall eat of the fruit of your hands, you will be happy, and it will be well with you. Your wife shall be like fruitful vine within your house, your children like olive plants around your table. Behold, for thus shall be a man be blessed who fears the Lord. The Lord bless you from Zion, and may you see the prosperity of Jerusalem all the days of your life. Indeed, may you see your children's children. Peace be upon Israel.
Thank you. And notice I put a space here to indicate, as we have in our previous studies, identified two stanzas in this particular poem. The first stanza is verses 1 through 4. Again, the Song of Ascents, that's just the title. All right. And then the first stanza is verses 1 to 4. And that was identified that way for a couple reasons. One is the inclusio that we see here, all right, where the first line and the last line are essentially the same, are very, very close. And that tells us that we have the inclusio is the beginning and the end of the stanza. And then also, too, the theme of verses 1 to 4 focuses on the man and how he's blessed within his home and his life. But verses 5 and 6 is a broader theme that's focusing on the people of Israel, the city of Jerusalem. And so we identified those two stanzas. And then for the diagram, our first step is to identify the independent clauses, and I should say in each stanza. And as in Hebrew like epistles with paragraphs, normally the independent clause is near the beginning of the stanza. And that is the case, as we found last week here, that everyone who fears how blessed is everyone is the independent clause in this first stanza. And then, thus shall the man be blessed is also, it's an independent clause that's closing the stanza. And then we looked at the second stanza and we noticed it was several independent clauses. Again, remember, an independent clause is a subject and verb that forms an idea that stands alone, okay? And so in the second stanza is the Lord bless you was an independent clause. May you see the prosperity was another one. May you see your children's children was another one, and peace be upon Israel. So every line was an independent statement. But again, even though there's only one conjunction here, that word and, it's assumed that all of these are connected together. All right, I'll talk about that when we get to that stanza in the diagram. All right, so we have two independent clauses in the first stanza. And if you don't catch it the first time, just look for one. Be able to identify one. And then as you go through the rest of the steps, I think you'll notice if there's another one that you missed. So definitely the first line of the poem of stanza 1 is how blessed is everyone. That's a complete thought. All right. Now he gives more detail below, but that's the independent clause. And so the second step then is to identify the remaining phrases and clauses within the sentence. How do we do that? Again, that's our good old friends, the connector words. And we went through these last week. And so all I've done is just highlight. This is what we already did last week. The gray is relative pronouns, and those introduced into dependent clauses. The blue are the conjunctions. Notice we have coordinating conjunction and, but also subordinating. When and for thus. All right. And as I mentioned last week, there are some statements here which there's an assumed conjunction that's connecting them. I'll talk about that in a minute. But in this step, all we do is just identify the connector words we see. Okay. And that's what we've done here. And then each connector word, then we break it up, each phrase or clause, which begins with the connector word. Now, okay, so that's what we've done here. Now, you can also use punctuation as a guide as well for finding the separate phrases and clauses. And then what we did last week was essentially looked at, identified every phrase and clause. Now, again, a clause is a group of words that go together that has a subject and a verb. A phrase is a group of words that go together but do not have both a subject and a verb. All right, that's the distinction. And so we just went through each of these and we're just looking, is there a subject and a verb? If so, that's a clause. And so that's what we identified. And then as we went through, we also noted the dependent clauses. That is those clauses that depend upon another word in the sentence. And those we know are dependent because they're usually either introduced by a conjunction or a relative pronoun. So for example, how blessed is everyone? We knew that is an independent clause. The subject is everyone. The verb is blessed. And I highlighted those here. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe I'll squeeze it a little bit here. There. And stop me, by the way. You guys have a question. All right. I'm just doing a review of what we covered last week. I highlighted the subject for each clause. I highlighted the subject in yellow and the verb in green, just so you could see it. So for example, that first clause is independent. The subject is everyone. Right? Sometimes in English, the subject can be at the end of the sentence. How blessed is everyone? Or you could say, everyone is blessed. Okay, that's the idea here. Who fears the Lord? Now that's a clause. Fears is my verb. Who is my subject? But in this case, it's a dependent clause because of that word who. That word who is telling me it's connecting it to something else in the sentence. Who fears the Lord can't stand alone because it's telling us there's somebody that's modifying. In this case, it is the word everyone. Okay? Everyone who fears the Lord. And then there's another independent clause, who walks. All right, again, subject who, verb walks. In his ways was a phrase. And then we had another dependent clause, when you shall eat of the fruit. And you is the subject and shall eat of is the verb. All right. The object is the fruit. And this is a dependent clause because it's being introduced by that word when. Subordinating conjunction, which is telling us when something is happening. So you shall eat of the fruit can't stand by itself because it's being introduced by this dependent clause, which we talked about last week toward the end is modifying you will be happy. And I'll go through that later. So you can go through this list. It'll be in your notes, but I've highlighted every subject in yellow, every verb in green, so that you could see why it's a clause or a phrase in the sentence. Okay. So that's all stuff that we did last week. And then after that, we started on this third step. And I've put in where we finished. So we got through verse 2 last time. And in this third step, again, is to take those phrases and clauses that you identified in the second step, and it is to take that phrase or that clause and answer or determine what it's connected to in the sentence. Now, if it is an independent clause, it's not connected to anything else. It stands by itself. But if it's a phrase or dependent clause, then it's going to be modifying something else in the sentence. And so in this step, your objective is to figure out what it modifies. Now, I think the easiest way to do that, or a place to start, would be to essentially look at the word right before the phrase or clause and see if it makes sense that it modifies that phrase or clause, that the phrase or clause modifies that word. And so we looked at these first examples that way. So what I'd like you guys to do is I want to give you guys a few minutes. I don't know if you have your notes or something from last week, and just try to go through, picking it up in verse 4, try to go through and see if you can identify what each of these phrases or clauses it modifies and how. All right? Like we did in the first two verses. So I want to give you a few minutes. Try it on your own. We'll go through it together, but I'd like you to at least give some thought yourself first. See if you can figure out where each phrase or clause goes. And again, remember, I'll just put it in. Well, I'll leave it. All right. So again, remember some of these we already identified as independent clauses, if you remember, right? So keep that in mind. May you see your children's children. Okay, so give that some thought and keep in mind, sometimes you're going to have a connector word that's implied but not written, ellipsis. For example, last week, if you'll remember, we looked at this phrase, you will be happy. We looked at that clause. We said, well, one, it's a clause. Use the subject. Will be is my verb. But we realized this is not standing alone, even though it looks like it, because there isn't any, the phrases or the clause is this, you will be happy. But as we look at the stanza, we realize the whole stanza is connected together, and that this statement, you will be happy, is actually the result of being blessed. Everyone is blessed who fears the Lord. One of the results of that, or one of the blessings, is you will be happy. And so that's why we said modifies is blessed, because it tells the result. So there's an implied for here, a reason or a result. For you will be happy. All right. So this is what I talked about earlier, that the word for there is no word for in the original Hebrew. The poet didn't put it there, but it is implied. These are connected. All right. Keep that in mind. That's going to help you when you look in verse 3 at these. There's some ellipsis happening in verse 3 as well. And so just keep that in mind. Okay. Any questions on this? I want you guys to take a few minutes on your own and do this third step. But are there any questions? And give it a try. All right, why don't you go ahead? I'll give you a little time, and I'll be here. So if you have a question, let me know, okay? Let's go over it together. Okay, I'll do the first one, and then I'll call on you guys to help out with the other ones. And we'll try to finish this up. Okay, so getting a running start here. Verse 3 begins, your wife shall be like a fruitful vine. And we identified previously this is a clause, because again, wife is the subject here. Shall be is the verb. And so the question is it independent or dependent? Now, it seems like it can stand alone. It's making a statement. Your wife shall be like a fruitful vine. But in the context of this stanza, it's not independent. Because as you study the stanza, realize, wait a minute, this is similar to what was above here. You will be happy. That was a result of the man who's blessed. And verse 3, this is another result of the man who is blessed. Okay? So it doesn't stand alone. There's an implied and here, connecting this clause to this clause. Okay? Everyone who fears the Lord is blessed. One way he's blessed is you will be happy when you eat the fruit of your hands. The second way is your wife shall be a fruitful vine. So we would say here, it modifies is blessed by telling a result. In this case, a second result. Let's see if I can fit this on here. All right. Okay, so we again have another result of, and there's an implied connecting conjunction and. Again, it's not in the poem. We look over here in the poem, there's no and here before your wife, just like there was nothing before you will be happy. But I believe, again, based upon looking at the structure of the stanza, these are not independent clauses here. They're connected in some way. And the connection is that your wife shall be a fruitful vine is yet another result. So it modifies is blessed. It modifies, it's another result of that. And so I put the conjunction and here in brackets, just as sort of a reminder. Can you guys see that okay? You see what I'm talking about here? The conjunction and. Okay. All right. So with that, let me, we'll start with Brother Arn, and we'll do the phrase within your house. And brother, just let us know, what do you think that word modifies and how? Where would you connect that? Make sure to unmute yourself too, so we can hear you.
Within your house, modifies shall be, am I right?
Okay, good. Yeah, and how does it modify it? What question does it answer?
By telling where?
Yeah,
Where?
exactly. You're exactly right. It's a location, right? Within your house.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, good. So because it's a location, it's telling us where something is happening. It's going to modify a verb. Notice here's, if it answers a question where, it's going to modify a verb. In this case, shall be makes the most sense. It's telling us where your wife shall be like a fruitful vine. Okay, so it's modifying the action, so to speak. Yeah, question or comment?
I will try. I have a question, sir.
Yes.
I will not read the answer, sir, but within your house, it can be modified fruitfulness within your house, telling us where.
Yes, it's describing where, and so because it's answering the question where, it has to be modifying a verb.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, that's why I have this list up here.
I tried another phrase, sir.
Yeah, it's not describing the vine. It's telling us where your wife will be like a vine within your house. So it goes with the verb in this case. We're going to see that, by the way, in the next statement. Okay, good. Good, Arn. Great job. Let's go to you, Brio. We'll have you do the next one here. Your children like olive plants.
Yes, I will try, sir. Your children like olive branch. I think, sir, modifies also the verb shall be, then telling us, but seems not a verb, sir, telling us the result.
Telling us what?
The result, sir.
Okay, yes, it is telling a result, but is it the result of your wife shall be like a fruitful vine, or is it the result of something earlier in the stanza?
Those who fear in the Lord.
Yes, it's the one who is blessed, right? It's one of the blessings. Okay,
Yes, sir.
So it goes back to is blessed. Now, there's a couple of things to notice here. The first is that there's some ellipsis going on here. Notice there's no verb in this statement.
And.
At least none that's written. Is there an implied verb? Is there some ellipsis here? What's missing?
Shall be.
Yes. Shall be. I'll put it in a brackets here. Okay? It's similar to that statement. Your wife shall be like a fruitful vine. Your children, and it's implied, shall be like olive plants. But the poet didn't write it there explicitly, but the idea is assumed to be there. That's ellipsis. The other is that we should see this as a connection and right?
Your children shall be like weeds.
Let's see, I've run out of space here. Let's do this. See if this will fit. No. Oh. Okay, we'll do this. Okay. So, yeah, those couple of things, it's important. One, note the ellipsis, your children shall be like olive plants. That's the full idea, the full thought. Even though the verb wasn't put there, it's assumed to be there based upon the parallelism, right? Based upon the parallel to the first line, which has the verb shall be. The second thing is, just as Brilio correctly pointed out, this is another result of is blessed. All right. And so we put the conjunction and there because it's implied that that's the connection. All right. So we've seen three results of everyone who is blessed who fears the Lord. The first result is you will be happy. The second is your wife shall be like a fruitful vine. And the third is your children shall be like olive plants. Okay.
Can I continue, sir?
Yeah. You want to do the next one? The phrase?
Around your table modifies, I think, sir, the verb I borrowed the above what shall be.
Yeah. Yes.
Where?
Exactly. Notice the parallelism here, right? Just like this one, we had within your house told us where your wife shall be a fruitful vine. Around your table is telling us where your children shall be like olive plants. Okay. All right, good. Very good. Now, behold, that's called an interjection. I put it on a separate line because it's an interjection. It's not modifying anything. It's just a word that's forced in for emphasis, for emotion, for drawing focus. All right. So it's not modifying another word. It's just a word that's inserted in it's an interjection. It's interjecting. It's interrupting, so to speak. All right. So that's why it's on a separate line and it's not modifying something else. It's connected to what's said after it, which is, thus shall the man be blessed. So Alan, I'm going to have you do this one. And what do you think?
Behold, for thus shall the man be blessed. That's dependent clause.
Okay, what is it modifying?
It modifies I think it modifies, considering the context, it modifies all of the above. And the key phrase is for thus.
Yeah, it's really a sort of a summary of the above, right? Again, remember, it's an inclusio. So it's paralleling the first statement there, right? How blessed is everyone. Thus shall the man be blessed. I think it's actually an independent clause in that it's repeating the first independent clause. So he makes a statement, everyone is blessed, then he describes how they're blessed, and then he repeats the statement. Thus shall the man be blessed. So I actually would put it as an independent clause because it's really summarizing verses 2 and 3, like you said, but it's not dependent on any of the words inside verses 2 and 3. It's a summary of. I think it's just repeating what he said at the beginning of the stanza. Okay, so knowing that it's an inclusio, the for thus here, it functions like a summary statement. It's not a dependent clause in this case. It's summarizing what was said between the beginning and the end here. Is there a question or comment?
So in inclusio, Pastor Tim, it looks like a bracket, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the end bracket is also an independent clause, like the first one, the first bracket.
Yeah, I think so in this case.
So is it always like that in inclusio, Pastor Tim?
Let me say, I think it is, yes. If the beginning of the inclusio is an independent clause, and I believe they are, I can't think of any examples where it's not, then the end inclusio would also be independent, generally speaking. Okay. Now, if this was another statement, like behold, for thus life will be good. All right. Now that's not an inclusio here. It is a summary statement, but it's dependent upon what is said before. But because this is an inclusio, he's just repeating what he said at the beginning. So I would make it independent clause, but it's still connected to the first stanza. He's just repeating how he began, right? He's just repeating what he said at the very beginning. He repeats it at the very end, I think on purpose, to sort of form this inclusio to tell us that this is all one stanza here. And its focus is on how the man is blessed who fears the Lord. And so notice, everyone is blessed who fears the Lord, begins, thus shall a man be blessed who fears the Lord, ends, and in between is how he's blessed. Okay? All right. Go ahead and finish verse 4 then, Alan. Who fears the Lord?
Who fears the Lord modifies the man by telling who? By telling who?
Good. All right. Now, one interesting distinction or difference is above here, it's everyone, or I think literally, let me look here. All right, a song of ascents. How blessed all. Yeah, all fearing, all. Okay, so in verse 1, it's all, but in verse 4, behold, thus the man, Gabor. So it's a different word, actually. That is the one difference between verse 1 and verse 4, is it goes from everyone to the man. So it's sort of a little more general statement in the beginning, but clearly the focus is on the man because it talks about his wife. Okay, so that's how he focuses it. Okay, good. All right. Let's see. Kazot, I'll have you do verse 5 here. The Lord bless you.
The Lord bless you. The Lord bless you. It's an independent clause.
Correct. Yeah, it's starting, it's the beginning of the stanza, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's an independent clause. Okay, from Zion. Where does that
From
phrase
Zion
go?
modifies, it's a phrase,
Yeah,
modifies bless,
good.
for it is answering the question where.
Very excellent. Exactly. So it's a location. So it's going to just answer the question where, and that means it's going to describe where an action happens. Where does the Lord bless? From Zion. All right. Good. Why don't you do one more, Kazo? And may you see the prosperity.
Independent clause, and it's a conjunction and.
Yeah. Notice, yeah, the conjunction and that connects this independent clause with this independent clause. All right. We always remind ourselves a coordinating conjunction connects two grammatically equal words or phrases or clauses. In this case, it's connecting these two clauses. Okay. And by the way, that's why I put the conjunction and up here in verse 3, because it's connecting a dependent clause, this dependent clause to this dependent clause. All right, good. Pastor Arn, I'll have you do the next couple of phrases here. May you see the prosperity of Jerusalem. What does that phrase of Jerusalem modify?
The prosperity.
Of Jerusalem, pastor, is a praise.
Correct?
And modifies.
Remember, whenever you see that preposition of, almost always it goes to the word right before it.
Prosperity.
99% of the time. Okay, yeah.
Prosperity of Jerusalem.
Yeah, it's modifying prosperity here, and it's telling us which prosperity or what kind. Okay, the prosperity of Jerusalem. It's specifically Jerusalem's prosperity. Okay.
Okay, which?
Okay, but telling which prosperity? Jerusalem's prosperity. Okay, how about all the days?
All the days modifies.
Think about what question it might be answering.
Prosperity.
Okay, is
bless.
Of Jerusalem.
Think about it. All the days, what question might that answer? If we go back to these questions up here. Is that a where, a when, a why, a how? What do you think?
All the days.
When?
Yeah, I heard somebody say it.
All the days modifies what? May you see, and by telling when.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, perfect. It's describing when, right? All the days. That's a time period. So it has to be telling us when. It must modify a verb, and the verb is see. All right, by telling when may you see the prosperity? All the days. Okay? All right, try one more there. All of your life. Okay, we've got that word of again.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, radio.
There's another verb, sir. I think cannot be separate. May see.
Yeah, may see. Oh, sorry. Yeah, helper verb. May see. Good. Thank you. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Was that what you were saying, Brio? It's may see.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Okay. So Arn, what about of your life? Where
Of
does
your
that go?
life, so connected modifies all the days.
Yeah, the days, right? By telling which
By
days,
telling
specifying. Which days? Days of
which
your life.
days. Yes, which.
Okay. Okay, good. Good. Berlio, I'll give you the last verse. We have indeed, that's an interjection, just like behold. And then we have, may you see your children's children. What is that?
May you see your children's children.
We'll have Berlio, can you answer that?
That's a dependent clause, sir. Independent clause.
Correct. It's another independent clause in this sentence. All right. Now, peace be.
Peace.
That's also a clause, and I say it's independent because upon Israel is a phrase. There's a preposition there, upon. Where does that upon Israel go, Berlio? What is that modifying?
Upon Israel. I think, sir, I try to guess, sir. The be verb, sir, be.
Yeah.
Modify.
Why is that?
Because it is a
Verb of being.
yes, verb of being.
It's a verb of being. And upon Israel,
Yeah.
that's a location, right?
Yes, sir.
So it's telling us where peace would be. Right? Peace be where? Peace be upon Israel. That's the idea. Okay, so now what we want to do is take this is the hardest step by far in the process, all right? Is trying to figure out where these phrases and clauses go. Sometimes, so then basically we've identified all these phrases and clauses, and so now we simply just, okay, place the phrase or the clause underneath the word it modifies. So we had how blessed is everyone who, modified everyone, fears the Lord, and who walks in his ways. Okay? Who walks, how or where, that modifies walks. And then we remember when you shall eat the fruit of your hand, it was a dependent clause. It didn't go to a word above it. It actually was modifying something said after it. And that's not common, but it does happen. And it's modifying will be happy. Will be. All right. And as I mentioned before, how blessed is everyone? That's the independent clause. You will be happy is a dependent clause because it modifies, or it gives a result of is blessed. And so we put for, and I'm putting it right underneath is here. Maybe hard to see. Okay. It's giving us a result. All right. For you, we, and then when you shall eat the fruit of your hands, that's modifying will be. So I'm indenting it there. Sometimes you can put like an arrow just to be clear. I'll do that for this one. So it's clear like what.
Who will be happy?
Yes.
When?
All right. Let me, there. Ooh, maybe a little more. Okay, I'll do that one. All right. So I put an arrow here just to kind of indicate, oh, that's not a very good arrowhead. Arrow, let's do. Sorry, I'm just trying to make this more. Okay, how about that? That's not great. All right. So that goes to you will be happy, which is a result of being blessed. And notice there is a conjunction here. So it's connecting this clause to this clause. It will be well. And then with you actually should be under there because it's telling us where it will be well. It will be well is another. Let's put it out here. Okay. And then we have another result. And again, that conjunction is not in the text, but it's implied that it's there because it's giving us another result of is blessed. All right, just trying to make this look a little nicer. So we have, notice, 3 results. You will be happy. It will be well. Your wife will be blessed. Where shall she be blessed? Within your house. Can we put that under? Shall be. Within your house. That's where your wife will be like a fruitful vine. And another result, your children shall be like olive plants. Where? Around your table. And then I had it this way, thus shall the man be blessed. And I put it as independent clause, again, as an inclusio here. Everyone who fears the Lord, the man be blessed who fears the Lord. Okay, that's why I put it over here. Now, the next stanza is a bunch of independent clauses. So the Lord bless you where? From Zion. And may you see the prosperity. Which prosperity? Of Jerusalem. When may you see this prosperity? All the days. Which days of your life? And then another interjection. Indeed, another independent clause, may you see your children's children. Another independent clause, peace be where? Upon Israel. So notice that the structure here, let me separate this a little more. You see kind of this inclusio here sort of it makes a statement, gives the results of that statement, and then repeats the statement. All right. So the emphasis of this first stanza is blessed. The blessing of being a man who fears the Lord. What are those blessings? You will be happy when you eat of the fruit. It will be well with you. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine, your children like olive branches. So how many blessings are described here of the man who fears the Lord? See that? 1. Let me do this. Oops. 4 of them, right? Because basically verse 4 is just repeating verse 1. And again, with an inclusio, another feature of an inclusio is it's basically emphasizing the theme of that stanza, or the main point. The main point is the man is blessed. How he's blessed, or the result, is given inside the inclusio. But your focus is that he's blessed. And it's the man who fears the Lord who is blessed. Not just anybody is blessed. The man who fears the Lord. And then verse 5 and 6 has more of the idea of a prayer, right? May you see. May you see. The Lord bless you. It's really the idea of may the Lord bless you. And then peace be upon Israel. That's again another prayer. That was a declaration, a requesting God to bring peace upon Israel, or shalom. Actually, that's another term for blessing. Shalom is peace. Okay, so the whole poem's full of this idea of blessed. All right, it's in verse 1. It's in verse 4 as part of the inclusio. And then it's said again in verse 5, the Lord bless you. Prosperity has the idea of blessing. The next independent clause. Peace is the idea of blessing. Okay, so if you don't have blessing in your title or your main idea of this poem, you've missed the point of the poem. Okay, that's my this idea. Okay, but notice it's a little different the way he approaches it in each stanza. The first one's focused on the man and really his home, his life, his labor, his wife, his children. And then the second is really more of a prayer of blessing in a general sense upon his city, his community, his nation. Okay. All right. Now, what makes this hard, what makes diagramming poems more of a challenge is, let's see, these ellipses here. Okay, I'll highlight it green just so you see. There's a few words here that are presumed to be there. You kind of have to really know what the poet's doing in the poem to understand that those are implied to be there. All right, the connections basically. And sometimes that's a challenge. But you just have to ask yourself as you go through the stanza, okay, we know it's one stanza because of this inclusio. Okay, so that's helpful. That's why I have you in the fourth step, when you do the poetic analysis, I want you to understand, identify the structure of the poem so that you can see where are the boundaries of the stanza. Because that stanza is all going to focus on a particular theme. And so even though it might look like the clauses are disconnected within a stanza, they really aren't. They're connected in some way. And in the case of this first stanza, they're connected, as I've shown you here with the brackets, what's left out. In the second stanza, really we could include, and, right? And because the idea is these are all linked together. This is all one stanza, all right? Verses 5 and 6. So these statements are not independent of each other. They are independent clauses grammatically, but they are linked together semantically, meaning that the thought process is that there's a connection between them. They're not separate statements that shouldn't be considered as part of the stanza. They're part of a stanza, therefore they are together presenting an idea or a thought. And I think it's just the broader aspect of request for blessing in the broader scope. Verses 1 to 4 just focuses on the man's home and his life. Verses 5 to 6 expands it to beyond his home and to the nation as a whole, the city and his nation. Okay? Questions on that, guys? I don't know if does that make sense?
Yes, Pastor Tim. It's very important for a guide, it's very important to make it visible, the elisions.
Yeah, that's why I put them in, just because then it's telling me it's giving the semantic idea. Maybe we don't see it there explicitly. He doesn't put a conjunction here, but the idea is there because, again, this is all one stanza. So I have to think about how are each of these phrases and clauses connected together. And of course, you'll have these in your notes, guys, that I'll send out. So you can kind of look at it, study it in more detail to see if, and hopefully that makes sense. But are there any questions about this diagram?
Actually, it helps us, Pastor.
Okay, good.
Mister.
Yeah, Bertio.
Sometimes we never place for and what we call this one, verse 2, for.
Yeah, this one here, for conjunction.
This conjunction, what we call it, not from the original writing.
Correct. It's implied.
It's implied.
Ellipsis.
Yeah.
I consider it as ellipsis.
Yeah, I do that because, again, I know that he's not making a separate statement. Like, he's not just saying a general statement. You're happy. You will be happy. Everyone will be happy. Well, no, in this poem, it's a specific person who will be happy, right? He's not just saying everyone will be happy. No, he's saying the one who fears the Lord will be happy. So that's why I know in this poem, this is connected to this. All right. And again, it's not just everyone is blessed. It's everyone who fears the Lord is blessed. We can't leave out that dependent clause. So we can't, you know, some preachers, they would just go, they would ignore this part up here, and they would just say, how blessed is everyone? You will be happy. And they'll make a whole sermon around God promises that you're going to be happy, right? But we can't disconnect this from what it's modifying here. I believe it's modifying is blessed. It's giving us a result of everyone who is blessed. It's only a certain person in this poem who is going, who the poet says will be happy. And the same here. It's not everyone's wife who be like a fruitful vine. He's not making a general statement about every husband. What he's saying is the man who fears the Lord. This is another result of fearing the Lord, another blessing. His wife will be like a fruitful vine. All right, again, and your children shall be like olive plants. Again, that's not a general promise to everybody. It's a statement made about here's another result of the man who fears the Lord, how he is blessed. Okay, so you have to think about how is each phrase or clause connected, and this is why it's important to recognize where are the stanzas. Because within the stanza, it's all going to connect to each other some way, somehow.
So, Pastor Tim,
Yeah.
it is really important to encourage some pastors to be enrolled in expository preaching.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can hear pastors that, especially in this psalm, they'll just talk about blessings, not specifying who are to be blessed.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up, because that's exactly true. That you know, right? The temptation is for pastors to take these phrases out of context, because that'll preach, right? I mean, everyone will want to listen to a sermon that says you're going to be happy, right? Let's look in the Word of God. God promises, brothers and sisters, you will be happy. Can I get an amen? Right? And of course, everyone loves that, right? And it's in the Bible. It says you'll be happy.
You will have many listeners coming to you.
Exactly.
That's the key.
Because you're
taking today.
That's true. Because people take a passage out of the context. And here you can't do that. There's a certain kind of person who will be happy. The one who fears the Lord. Okay? So you can't disconnect these statements. They go together. So the diagram is meant to make us think about how are these all connected. I know within each stanza, the statements in the stanza are connected together somehow. The diagram forces me to ask the questions, okay, how is this phrase connected? How is this clause connected here? What's it linked to? All right. So that's how a diagram can be helpful. And again, it is, you know, the hardest step in the whole process, really. But I think it's, you know, the most important because it helps us understand how everything fits in the context. So that you don't.
Yes. Excellent outlining, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, and it shows the outline.
Yeah, having outlined it the way you did, it's really very clear. No, you have that visual guide. It's very clear. Actually, I'm keeping it.
Yeah.
I'm going to preach that.
Go ahead. Do the other steps, but yeah.
Pastor,
Yeah, I mean,
we will have an outline for this coming Sunday.
yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Pastor Tim,
Yeah. Kazo.
how can we approach or tell some pastors, even our friends, our pastors, to be encouraged in studying or engage in expository preaching as not to offend them?
Yeah, that's a good
They will
question.
enroll this coming.
Yeah, second batch.
Second batch, I have.
You're giving Pastor Tim something to consider again, huh? Another work.
Well, Pastor Bobby and I were talking about it not long before he died. You know, he was wanting to explore when things opened up, you know, if we could try to gather another group of men. I think he was talking about in the area, is it Bukidnon? Is that the name of it?
Valencia.
Well, Valencia, no, he was talking about to the northeast of Cagayan de Oro. Not Bukid. It started with a B.
Bukidnon.
It's Bukidnon, right? Bukidnon.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. He
Northern
said he knew
Mindanao.
some men there that he thought it would be a good idea to try to start something. So yeah, Kazal, that's a good question. You know, how do you help somebody maybe to see something they don't realize they need? You know, that.
Yes, Pastor, it's a struggle because there are many pastors in our place or in our neighboring places here in Zamboanga del Norte, in Misamis Occidental, in Zamboanga del Sur. I have known them and they are not into expository preaching. And it saddened me really. And to hear them, it's a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes maybe just if you're able to talk with them and just ask questions like if they preach from a certain passage, just maybe, you know, see, I was curious, you know, when you were preaching from that passage and that statement, you know, whatever, like say he's preaching from Psalm 128, you know, and he's talking about you'll be happy. The Lord promises blessing and your wife will, you know, and he maybe asking questions like, I was wondering how that statement is connected to what he says before it or after it, or just maybe get them to think about the context a little bit without telling them, hey, you said you took this out of context, you preached this wrong, you know, that won't help. But maybe just kind of asking some questions, you know, hey, I was wondering how you saw, you know, what's the connection with this statement in this poem here? How does it, you know, and see, and maybe you'll get him to think a little bit. Oh yeah, I wonder how those go together. You know, but honestly, it's not till you maybe hear some expository sermons and hear somebody explain a passage and the context and how everything relates. That's usually when somebody will think about, oh, you know, maybe I should be thinking more like that. And you pray, right? I mean, God's got to do the work in our hearts. God's got to show us the need. So, yeah, it's a tough question, but you know, I think, if you pray about it, and sometimes if you're able to just ask questions from them, maybe from one of their sermons, and just see, maybe the Lord will use that to open up opportunity. So I don't know.
Thank you, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's hard. That's a hard one.
I understand your situation, Brother Kazo.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I gotta do some preparation for my message for our Pakistani brothers, but thank you for